And when I got up in the morning, at like 8 a.m. on a Saturday, I was just in such a bad mood and I was mad at them. Yeah. So I jumped up and down on my side of the wall, like really hard on our old wooden floors. And then I slammed the bathroom door and trying to wake them up, obviously. And that's what led to the cookie baking later in the day. Because I really felt like, why did I, like, that's not who I want to be. I don't want to be that neighbor. I want to be this neighbor.
Welcome to Book Therapy. I'm your host, Kim Patton. There's no way to count how many books are floating around in this world. Some are decent, some are truly terrible, and some are great. Today we're going to take a deep dive into one great book. Together we will discover gems of truth and encouragement to help you face your current season of life. I'm ready, you're ready, let's get this party started. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Book Therapy. Today we are talking with a special guest, but before we get to that, if you haven't listened to the previous episode, go back and listen to that before the interview today, because you'll get a great introduction of this author and her first book. She's really, really special to me, and I can't wait for you all to meet her. These two books have been instrumental in my life, as well as her other writing. Okay, on with the show. Let's dive into the book. Today we are talking about Holiness Here by Karen Stiller, searching for God in the ordinary events of everyday life. Karen Stiller is a senior editor of Faith Today magazine, and she writes frequently for magazines. She's a two-time recipient of the prestigious A.C. Forrest Memorial Award, and she lives in Canada. She's the author of The Minister's Wife, and she has also co-authored other books. And I have her on the show with me today. Welcome to the show, Karen.
Thank you, Kim. It's so nice to be here with you.
Holiness Here was a very pleasant read. I listened to it on audiobook, and I was in this very house cleaning my bathroom, vacuuming my floors, pushing the volume up higher so that I could hear it over the vacuuming.
That's good. That's good.
And I really enjoyed the book because not only are you very witty, which I think you have labeled yourself as, or someone else labeled you as witty, and that was exciting to you that someone else would also call you witty.
I don't think I've ever called myself witty, but I mean, let's just see how this goes. Maybe I'll make you laugh.
You made me laugh so much in this book, even when I was rereading it for the podcast. I just had those little like embarrassing chuckles. Like it's just like you just have the best way of wording those little sentences. It's really inspiring as a writer to read your writing, but also you are inspiring me as a Christian in that you place yourself very low. You give yourself a lot of grace. You don't sugarcoat anything. You say like, this is really hard for me, and I'm kind of, envious, and I love money, and I am not better than anyone. And I think the way you place yourself so low, it reminds us how low we are and how we can only go up from here. And the grace of God allows us to reach higher and to grow. And I think in this book, you encouraged me that I can also handle my envy in a gracious way, and I can be generous even when I don't want to. So thank you so much for the posture that you wrote this book in.
Oh, thank you, Kim. That's wonderful to hear. And there's two things I'd love to pick up on that, and I'll start at the last one, and that word was posture, because I think the posture we take as writers impacts our practice of writing. I really believe, and so if our posture is one of humility, even in the act of writing, meaning we're viewing it as collaborative and we're welcoming input and we're showing our work and all that, then that makes our work better. So posture in writing matters, but also, of course, posture in life. And what struck me when you were talking about the parts that maybe resonated with you more was that there's such power in being honest with each other and in sharing our true stories. And of course, in our personal lives, we choose wisely. Sometimes we have to, with whom we go full disclosure, say. But I think that the more honest I have been in my life with my struggles and my shortcomings, and my questions and my doubts and all those things, actually, the more loved I have felt by God and by other people. And that helps us in our walk, and it helps us in every part of our lives. So yeah, I am so glad. And the other thing I loved about what you said was that you listened to it while you were like vacuuming and, cleaning the toilet or doing all this stuff. Because one thing I'm really, tried to do in the book was, the title is Holiness Here, is just kind of bring it down to earth, that it's part of our ordinary, daily, gritty, real life. So I love that you listened to it while you were vacuuming.
You say in the subtitle, ordinary events of everyday life. And as you were telling your stories, honestly, they were very ordinary. And it was
Absolutely.
it was mind blowing that you were able to take the smallest things and teach me something from that. Because I think other writers may say, oh, you can't give that example. That's nothing. How are people going to learn from that teeny tiny example of just a thought that just flew in your mind and flew out of your mind? What could we possibly learn from that? And yet you'll spend a whole chapter on it, and you'll tie different stories together that show me, yes, we all have those thoughts about our neighbors. We all go back and forth of, am I a good person? Am I not a good person? How could I possibly think of myself as holy? And yet your husband, would stand in front of the whole congregation and say, you're a saint, you're a saint, he's a saint, she's a saint. And you all kind of laughed, because that's our ordinary life. We sit in church and the pastor says something and we think, that's
Yeah,
that's
not
not
me.
right. But it is. So
Mm-hmm.
not everybody likes to read nonfiction for this reason. They don't want to read about ordinary life. And there are some people who won't read your book because they would rather read fantasy about extraordinary stories of not an ordinary life. But I think you and me, we are both lovers of nonfiction and the nitty gritty of today and our bodies
Yeah.
and what's around us and our families and what is God teaching me in this small moment. So I appreciate it. I can see how on some other days it may be more appealing to pick up a good fiction book, because I don't want to
Yeah.
reflect on my sin.
Well, you know what? That is fair enough. And the interesting thing about books and stories, I think, is that even in, the kind of most, if I could say, unrealistic fantasy novel, um, and I hesitate to use the word unrealistic because I'm probably about to contradict myself, the presence of story is essentially, it can all be boiled down to the same kinds of things: the human emotions, the longing, the conflict, the hero's journey, the resolution, and all of that, which that resonates with us because we still recognize ourselves in it. And so even when I read a great novel, which I love, I am never not reading fiction. I always have fiction on the go. um, Inevitably, if I love the book, it's because I find myself in it somewhere, I guess there is the pure escapism element too, but there's still something familiar about the arc of the story, right? That is about our humanity. So I think and I do love nonfiction. I've always been a reader of memoir, especially in recent years. And the ones that appeal to me tend to be, even if they're of like a big name person, it's still that, hero's journey, that, learning curve, that the ordinariness of our lives that connect us with each other, that I really love.
We could probably talk for days about books you've read, so maybe I'll have to message you about those memoirs, because you've got me like, what memoirs have you been reading? I want to know.
Okay, we will text each other or email.
So the first thing we're going to talk about is holiness is not a straight line. You say on page 80, we do not grow in a straight line. Holiness cannot be charted on graph paper, although that would be easier and so much more predictable. The journey into our holiness so we can live out of our holiness is more loop than line. Holiness is in and out, backward and forward, around and around, then out a bit farther and in a bit deeper. 3 steps forward and 2 steps back, exactly like our mothers described our progress in other things, with that sigh.
Oh, listen to me laughing. I shouldn't laugh at my own, but I was imagining my mother sighing. Um, yeah, I think that is, and I will tell you in my reading, like, a huge part of writing is reading. And in my reading, I actually came upon in one older book about holiness a depiction of a diagram. It was a graph-like diagram, literally showing an upward moving line, and I toward holiness. And I just thought that's not the way it goes for me, at least. And so I think it is a spirally journey, meaning we will, quote unquote, fail. We will fail forward. That's a term I hear in my day job, and I've come upon, which I really love, that we learn from, it's so basic. We learn from our mistakes. We learn from the things that don't go right. And one thing I try to show in the book is that even when do the quote unquote right thing, do the holy thing, you may not always feel like it inside of you. And if we wait until we feel like doing things, so often we don't do them because our feelings sometimes catch up with our actions. And I think that is part of living out of our holiness that God has told us we have. God has told us we are holy. And so we can dare to believe that and then dare to live in a different way because of that. But no, it's not going to be, it's not about perfection. It's not even necessarily about progress. It's about living where we are out of that belovedness, which would and should impact how we are in the world. So yeah, definitely spirally.
That reminds me of your introductory story of the neighbors with the elephants in their apartment and the way you were trying desperately to sleep and yet they didn't care. And then you decided the next day to make them cookies and you were talking with Brent about, is this passive aggressive? And you decided, well, if you had if you had done it in a different order, then yes, it would be perceived as passive aggressive. But because you made them the cookies and didn't say anything, it was just
it's holy math, the math of holiness. Yeah, so you described well what happened. I had a big writing day planned. They were really loud on the other side of the wall. And when I got up in the morning, at like 8 a.m. on a Saturday, I was just in such a bad mood and I was mad at them. Yeah. So I jumped up and down on my side of the wall, like really hard on our old wooden floors. And then I slammed the bathroom door and trying to wake them up, obviously. And that's what led to the cookie baking later in the day. Because I really felt like, why did I, like, that's not who I want to be. I don't want to be that neighbor. I want to be this neighbor.
Secondly, holiness is hard. And we kind of already talked about that, how the guilt set in after you were jumping up and down. Maybe while you were jumping up and down, you were already feeling guilty of like, I shouldn't be doing this, but I'm mad at them.
I did enjoy it. Probably the first jump, I enjoyed it. By the third jump, I probably wondered what I was doing.
And hoping nobody,
Yeah,
saw
exactly.
you. Your husband had needed a kidney transplant. And I really enjoyed hearing the background of the story of when he said he felt extremely vulnerable going to his family, sending out an email. Hey, happy Monday. Guess what? I need a kidney. And um and of course you thought about it because it was your husband and you knew that it was a possibility that you would need to give him your kidney. And you say on page 47, did I want to donate a kidney to my husband? That was the wrong question. Was I willing? Yes. It sounded hard, and I'm weak and woozy at bodyish and bloody things. But sometimes life and love requires us to say yes when we are tapped on the shoulder. If someone asks you for your shirt, give them your kidney also.
Yeah.
You did not end up giving him your kidney. Someone else did, a cousin. But talk to me about how this whole kidney transplant showed you the holiness of not only his cousin who did the operation, but your
Hmm.
husband who received it in grace and thankfulness, and also you a little bit relieved maybe that you didn't have to go under the knife, but also grateful to his cousin and, supporting him through the process.
Yeah. No, that's great, Kim. Thank you for asking about that. So I think there were a few things that for me in that story, and one was Brent's need to be vulnerable and ask for help in such a basic, you know, no choice way. There was no choice. He needed to ask for help. For both of us, that was difficult because, and you mentioned he was an Anglican priest. I was a minister's wife. So we were accustomed to being the ones who helped. And so to ask for help and be so vulnerable was hard because also when you open yourself up to other people, you risk being hurt. So I also had to work through feelings about, the people who didn't rush forward to offer to be tested for
Mm,
to give Brent a kidney,
mm.
even though I recognized my own reluctance and fear and misgivings and all of those things. So there's something there again about our shared humanity and that we need each other and that we're not in this story alone. So that was part of it. And then yeah, this call to do a big thing. So at one point in talking about holiness here, somebody asked me about like, what about the saints from history who, I guess like the people who are burned at the stake, that level of
Mm-hmm.
what seems like incredible holiness. And, how are we to think of them? And what I thought about in that moment was that we actually don't know what we're capable of in terms of good things. Like we talk, I think, pretty openly about we're all capable of doing all kinds of rotten things. Like if, that's almost baked into our doctrine, right? Where we could all do
Mm-hmm.
anything bad. But I really believe this must be true that we can also all do anything good. And so we don't know how capable we are of generosity, of selflessness, of love for neighbor, of we just don't know how many good things we could do too because of who we are and how we're made and how God has loved us and redeemed us and, that we're made in God's image. So I think that's part of it too. And that's that we do rise up. We can rise up to the occasion. And that's certainly what Brent's cousin did. And, she, at one point she said, I'm afraid I'm going to get it wrong. I'm not a saint, but I'm not a fool or something like that. Or
Mm-hmm. I
I can't
remember that.
remember, but
Yep.
yeah, it was some great little line. And I thought, well, you are a saint and no, you're not a fool. Like she went into it very clear headed, but it is a sacrifice and it took, weeks out of her life. And, but it was, it was really beautiful. And it was a wonderful, hopeful time for our family because Brent was restored to health for a good chunk of time. And it was, and so to see her do that and to be able to love him during that time and care for him and see his gratitude, it was beautiful.
Thirdly, holiness is a comfort. And we see that in what happened next is that the kidney transplant worked. And you had your husband healthy, but lathered in sunscreen and his big hat.
1 year.
Year. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just over a year. Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
So the kidney bought him a little bit of time, but not enough time. And he passed away. And I know as you were writing this book, you had most of it completed, but towards the end of the book, when he passed away, you were not sure
Mm-hmm.
if you were going to be able to finish writing. and your family encouraged you to continue writing and to finish the book. Those last chapters were hard to read. I remember
Mm-hmm.
reading, I know this is terrible timing, but this is just what I did. I was at the doctor to, I think, get like a strep throat test or something because I had a terrible cough, and I was sitting there waiting right at the part in my audiobook where your husband was dying, and I was crying in the waiting room. But I couldn't stop listening because I wanted to hear it. My heart was breaking, and I know your heart has been broken a million times since that day. So talk to me about how you felt holiness was a comfort to you through the people around you when Brent passed away.
Yeah, thank you, Kim. Um, so, just for the sake of listeners, Brent died from a very rare side effect of transplant, which is post transplant lymphoma. And it hit him very quickly. He went to emergency at the hospital and he never came home again. And he died about 5.5 weeks later. Um, and it was just like completely out of the blue. That's what it felt like. And it was a difficult death. The cancer that he suffered was on his brain. So that was how our story turned very abruptly and quickly and unexpectedly. And I mentioned that Brent was a minister, and so our church, of course, gathered behind us. I would say around us, except that we had to, because of the nature of Brent's illness at that time, we set up some pretty high fences because we didn't know if he would get better or not. We hoped he would, and we were trying to protect him. So we didn't have people trooping in and out of the room. If you had to be pretty special and pretty close to get in the room, so to speak. But our children, we have 3 adult children in their 20s. We gathered around him and loved him very well until the end. We took really good care of him. And just last night, I was talking to my daughter because you revisit. It's only been about 18 months since Brent died, so we're still very much in the thick of grief and sorting through different things. And I was reassuring my daughter again that we really took good care of him, Holly. Like we have that we took really good care of him. So within our family, I felt this incredible bond of love and service toward him. And for us, that was holy. It was holy to cut his toenails and wash his hair and lay with him on his hospital bed. Like it was 100% holy. And his funeral was like incredibly beautiful. And that would have mattered to him because he did really good funerals. Funerals were very important to him and a huge part of his work as a pastor. And I think that we don't talk about that. Pastors don't talk about that, but funerals are important. And it mattered to me that we called it a funeral and not a celebration of life because we weren't celebrating yet. We weren't thankful. Hard. Yeah. So there was the holiness of worship in that setting that was really incredible, actually, even in our brokenheartedness. And then the people who came alongside us after. So this was me doing the work of trying to see mercy. So at one point, my boss, who's a theologian, came and sat in my living room, and I said to him, I don't see mercy anywhere. And he literally, I won't be able to remember them and I wouldn't list them off anyway, but he listed off like, I see mercy in 8 places. And he listed off and just really gently. And it helped me. It helped me to see through his eyes that God was still present because you don't always feel that. And that was actually a disappointment to me, but I've talked to other grieving people since because I'm pretty honest about that in the book, that I didn't feel the quote unquote comfort of the Holy Spirit. And I have found that that's typical for whatever reason.
Okay.
And I'm obviously not speaking for all grieving people here. But other people showing up, caring for us, doing practical things, food, fixing things. Like I had, this beautiful small army of churchmen who would come and, do things. And it was just like amazing. It was amazing to me. And the things that things that I didn't know how to do, like, how do I fix the lock on this door of this SUV? Like, how do how do I light my barbecue? How do I tell if the propane tank is full? How do I, like, the flush isn't working on the toilet. How do I do this? Like, man, I didn't know how to do anything. And so I choose to see that as like holy work by them. And that I could ask for help, and I did ask for help. I had to ask for help. Again, that being like showing your tender, needy side to other people and letting them be holy onto you, letting them put you first sometimes, and being willing to accept that. That's sort of this, I think, beautiful, organic, ecology of holiness in the church. When we're all putting each other first, sometimes it's your turn. It will be your turn to be put first. And our job is to just thank you and take that.
Well, absolutely. And throughout the book, as we wrap this up, I just encourage my listeners to get the book, because the little stories that you tell, I love the little break in your chapters. And you did this in The Minister's Wife too. You just have a little break and you just dive right into another story, or you just dive right into another truth. And I can't wait. I finish one paragraph and I see that little break and I'm like, what is she going to dive into next? It's always, of course, in the audiobook, I didn't get that little break in the page, but as I'm reading your books, it's very compulsive to keep going, because you are not preachy, and yet you convey these truths in a very simple, witty, easy to consume way. And I do not like reading nonfiction that tells me what to do, to where I stiffen my back and I'm like, wait a minute, I don't need you to. But the way you do it in story over and over and over again, I'm just so thankful for your writing. And I'm thankful that you have finally embraced that you're a good writer as well, because I know it took you a long time. So thank you for this book. Thank you for your ministry of writing. I am sad that we have to wrap this up, because there's so much more that I want to talk about, but I just encourage my readers to get your book so that they can see for themselves.
Oh, Kim, thank you. And I'm going to give you a little gift and tell you that little mark, like a little asterisk or whatever, in writing, it's called a dinkus, Dinkus.
No way.
Which is so fun. I learned it when I went back to school and did this Master of Fine Art and Creative Nonfiction. And that's when I learned and embraced that as a writer's tool. So it is really good.
I love your use of your dinkuses in your book.
Thank you, Kim. And I love that you're doing such a great podcast. And it's wonderful. And it's just such a cool concept. And I think a podcast like yours is an act of service. And it's beautiful. So well done, you.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to another episode of Book Therapy. Today we had the privilege to talk with Karen Stiller, the author of Holiness Here. She also wrote The Minister's Wife, which we talked about in the previous episode, as well as other books. I follow her on Substack. She also has a website, karenstiller.com. I highly recommend following her and learning from her, as I have been for the past several years. All right, see you next time.